Hey guys, my name's Aaron from Geeky Development and welcome to our Xcode tutorials. Now in this tutorial we're going to be talking about stack views. Now stack views are simple ways in which we can hold our content and create universal views to work on every screen size and device type. It's a brilliant way for, instead of using constraints to make our objects resize themselves for like iPad or iPhone and different screen sizes, we can contain them in a simple stack view and it does all the work for us. Now this tutorial has been taken directly from our iOS 10 and Xcode 8 complete Swift-free and Objective-C course, where you can create fantastic, fun, addictive and very useful applications and games with over 40 hours of video content within Swift-free and Objective-C. And if you check out the link in the description, you can get this course with a huge discount only using the link down below. So make sure you go check that out and let's begin with this tutorial. Now stack views allow us to create simple yet so effective interfaces that resize themselves on different devices and screen sizes, and they're going to look good in both portrait and landscape. Now previously, we always would have created applications when it comes to the interfaces using constraints, pinning them, making sure they have aspect ratio or fixed snare height when doing all this. And if you got quite a complex interface with like more than 10 objects, you wouldn't know yourself that you're having to keep dragging and dropping the constraints, moving them around. Something doesn't work, you got to go back and change it. And it can become quite a nightmare. But stack views simplifies everything that we're going to be doing. So we're going to jump into our main.storyboard and we're going to create a very simple interface and then use stack views to make sure the interface kind of replicates itself, changes, resizes on all different devices and screen sizes. So when you're creating your interface, think of the interface as different areas, different zones. And what we're going to do is work with it in quite a different way to how you would normally work with an interface. Now before we get into adding in any of our objects, we're going to solely design our interface and how we want it to look purely off UI views. And there's a good reason behind this. So I'm going to scroll down now and I'm going to drag and drop in a simple UI view here. There we go. And I'll change the background color of it as well. Let's go for something that we can clearly see. Let's go for yellow here, the yellowy orangey color. So the reason I'm using UI views is very simple. If we design it with UI views first and kind of create the content areas to where our objects are going to be placed, I can then add these UI views into stack views and fix the layout. I can then add the individual objects to these individual views to configure our interface and add small constraints to them just to make sure they resize within their own view. And this minimalizes all the effort that's needed and making sure that the interfaces look just as good as they do on the screen size you designed it on something that's a lot smaller or a lot bigger. So what I'm going to do then, I got this simple view here. Let's copy and paste it a few times then, and we're going to kind of come up with something very, very, very simple. So drag and drop that down. And let's make these ones at the bottom a little bit smaller. So you may be wondering, what am I doing? Well, think of these views, like I said before, as individual content areas. So got something in my mind that I'm going to try and create. So if I copy that and paste it over. So it's going to be a rough design, but we'll finalize it all out eventually. So let me get all this set up and then we'll go through it. There we go, to the side there. There we go. So these views now, like I said before, they're going to be our content areas. We're going to have a bunch of content inside each of these views. Now the reason I made them yellow is so I can clearly see them. So you're looking at this and you can kind of see in your mind, it looks very similar to like maybe a newspaper where all the columns are laid out in different areas. And that's kind of roughly what a stack view kind of does. It takes all these columns, and if we blew up the newspaper and made it smaller, all those columns will stay the same. They'll just resize and get smaller or larger just to fit that same area they're trying to display it on. So the objects I'm going to be adding in, I'm going to add in some image views, placing some images, maybe add some buttons and some labels, and they're all going to be placed within all of these content views, so to speak, as we're calling them. But to use stack views is very simple. Now, if I wanted all these views to be kind of resize and link together. I would have had to painstakingly go through all of the constraints. But with stack views, let's start with the very top here. I'll just highlight these two because they're very similar. They're going to be in the same direction, same size, same type. And what I'll do is go down to the bottom to this little icon down below, which says stack. I select it and it links them together. So you may be thinking, wait, what's going on? I've now got errors and stuff. Don't worry. We then select the next two, which again, these are very similar. I'll stack those. And these three at the bottom, they're also very similar again, and stack those. So they're now all linked together. On the side panel here, I have these stacks, or stack views, which I've now expanded, and all of our views are placed within it. You can see they're still there. Nothing to worry about. But they're now all being held within their own stack view. Now the stack view themselves, they change. As you can see, this one's vertical because the objects have been placed in vertically, as opposed to this one, which is the middle one, which has the objects being placed horizontally. So you can see how it changes. We can freely change how it looks ourselves. Now what I'm going to do is select all of these stack views now and stack them inside their own stack view. You may be thinking, this is crazy, what is he doing? I'm going to drop this down now so you can see all the individual stack views within the stack view. It gives us an additional level of control. So we've got this complete stack view, which is holding our other three stack views, which in turn is holding all of our views. Sounds really complicated. And I said at the beginning, this is going to make creating interfaces a lot more simple. Well, it is. It is. You would see just now. I'm going to pin it like I would normally do any view to our application. So pin it all the way around here. And the bottom one, let's go 20 and add that constraint in. So it resizes all the way around the view. Then I'm going to make sure I'm selecting the top stack now. I've added those constraints in. And we're going to change the alignment and the distribution. So the alignment is how the objects within inside the stack view again get aligned. We've got it to currently fill, which fills the width, the whole width of the current stack view. We can do leading, which fixes it to the left, center is in the middle, and trailing is to the right. So I'm going to leave it on fill. And distribution now, I'm going to make it fill equally. So all the objects inside will fill it with the same kind of sizes. They'll be equally. Now inside our top stack view is our free stack view. So this is what it's going to adjust. So I'm going to add in now some spacing. So as I add in the spacing, you can see that it creates the gap in between the free stack views themselves. So we've still got a few warnings on the project at the moment, but they'll go as I then interact with the free additional stack views inside. So we've pinned this stack view, this main one, around all of the edges. Then inside, we have the free kind of sub-stack views, as we could kind of call them. We've made sure that they fill equally, so all three of them are the same size, and we have a space of 10 in between each one. There we go. So we then go on to select our first stack view inside of our stack view, which is our top one, and we do the same process. We'll fill it equally, and let's add in some spacing. Maybe 5 will be enough for this one. I'll go into the second one. Again, fill equally, add in some spacing. Let's go 5. We'll keep 5 on the in between them. And then finally the last one. Fill equally, add in 5 as spacing. So the setup, the kind of interface looks exactly like it did before when we created it. Actually, I'm going to reduce this one down to 5 as well. How does that look? Looks a lot better. So again, like I said before, the interface looks, again, identical to what we created before we added in all these stack views. But the difference is, I've pinned the main stack view around the edges, and the other stack views are now housing all this content. So if I went to build and run, and resized and different screen sizes, and even rotated, you can see exactly how the objects get interacted with. So we're going to go and build and run it now on this simulator, test it in both portrait and landscape mode, and even on a smaller iPhone simulator before we go on to add objects in and create a more complex interface. So we're going to see how exactly it looks. So let's go to build and run now. So as it's built and run, this is the same size simulator we've designed it on the interface, so it's going to look the exact same. But if I choose to rotate it, I'm going to press Command or right and left on the arrow keys. And as I rotate, you can see how it adjusts itself and displays in a landscape mode. So
it fits all on the screen. The objects, they stretch, of course. I have quite a few kind of rectangles down below the content views, and they're all quite small anyway, so they will stretch out, but you can see how it adjusts the views. So you can play around with this and create your perfect interface to look brilliant in both portrait and landscape. But if you're only solely designing in one orientation, then rotating may not be for you. So the main goal for this is making sure it looks great on all different screen sizes. Now granted, we don't have any objects in, this is just resizing the content views, but having these content views is very important because we're going to be placing the objects inside of them. So when the objects are inside the content views and they get resized and moved about, portrait, landscape, different sizes, the content views themselves will interact with the objects inside to move them around. So we're going to test it now on a smaller simulator. Let's go for the iPhone SE, and you'll see then dramatically the difference because we designed it on such a larger interface. How's it going to look on a smaller interface? And as you can see, now it's built and run, it looks perfect. There's no problems at all, and there was no effort into designing this. So like I previously said then, this doesn't really matter until we've actually got objects in. All we've done is made UI views look really good on different screen sizes. We want to actually add the content in. How can we design these interfaces? So let's do it. So back within our project, I'll get rid of our debug area. And on the desktop here, I have various nice, beautiful looking, as I resize it, different landscapes. So these are nice images that I'm going to add into my project now. So if you want to use these, there'll be a downloadable resources kind of file attached to this lecture. You can simply download and use these images and follow along. But I'm going to drag and drop those into our assets.x cassettes so we can use them within our project. So back within our main.storyboard then. So back into these content views, let's add some actual objects in. Let's get this interface looking half decent. So the first one then, maybe I drag in a label. So if I select on the view itself and drag and drop it over, I could simply choose to have this label full screen. I mean, some of these content views will add in multiple objects, but let's go for this one. I'm going to go full screen. Let's center it and let's say stack views. Yeah. Let's change it. I don't know. Let's keep it black because we eventually going to be getting rid of the background color on these content views because we don't want to keep those in. So let's up the size. Let's make it nice and big. Let's change it to a custom font or a different style of font. Let's go for one of my favorites. There we go. Nice and big. Now, because this is simply going to be resizing the label as well when it moves about, we want to make sure that we have a auto shrink feature on. So we have the ability to have a minimum font size. So as the stack view gets smaller, it will also adjust the text within the label. Now we're going to pin the label all the way around the edges. Now what it's going to pin to is the view that it's currently being placed in. So if I add those in, you can see the constraints go to the edges and not the whole of our application. So now this label resizes to when the stack view resizes. And that's really simple and really easy to add something like that in. So let's add something else and let's add in some images. Let's use these images we've been talking about. So let's drag and drop one in there. This one's completely huge. There we go, resize it, and we're in. So let's add multiple images in them. Let's make this a little bit bigger there. Let's copy and paste it. Let's have 2 of these in them. And let's center that, that's fine. And space those out, and space those out. Now are these very similar in terms of width? They're not. What's this one? This one's 160 by 159. So if I make that one a little bit bigger, select them both, and then go down to our pin and pin it to all of the edges around it, making sure that it's always going to have equal widths. So by doing that, as we get bigger and smaller again, when they start to resize, they're always going to have the same equal width. So one will never get bigger than the other. So if I select our first one and add in our first image, so we're going to call this one image 1, and this one is going to be image 2. So these 2 image files now placed in, and again they're going to resize themselves and move up and down and go all over the place depending on the kind of scale it goes. So let's add another image in then. So let's start with this one, and let's make this one completely full screen. We'll drag it to the very edges, and we're going to pin it to its entirety of the view. So pin this all in. This is going to be acting very different now. So add in those 4 constraints, and we'll add in our new image. Let's go for, let's go for image 5. There we go. What's that one? And then we'll change how the content mode is being displayed. So let's go to aspect fill. So this image now is way too bigger than what it's going to be able to display within our own image view. So we're going to make sure that we clip it to its bounds. So it only shows inside of the image view while it can. But the image aspect fill is scaled in proportion as well. So it looks really good. So again, we've only pinned it to the edges, so that will resize itself. Now this next one, I want to try and fit quite a few more objects in. Let's play around with this one. We'll use images again. And then we'll go on to using the 3 at the bottom with different objects. So let's place this in there. Let's see. Can I go for, let's try and get 4 in all together. So if I copy that and paste it. There we go. I'll paste that over. Copy that and paste it in. Now you're going to see straight away that none of these objects, again, are even the same size. So we're going to try and change that. So let's select them all. And we're initially going to pin them all the way around. There we go. And then let's make sure that they have equal widths and equal heights, adding those constraints. And then we're going to update the frames. So the frames, the actual objects themselves, update to what the constraints we have basically set them to. So update frames. There we go. So all 4 of their images view now is all the same size. So let's give these actual images. Image 1. Image 2. Image 3. And image 4. Now let's also make these aspect fill as well. So changes to aspect fill. And then make sure we clip to bounds. There we go. So it doesn't scale those out of proportion. This is coming along quite nice. We have various different kind of setups within each of these content views. So this is kind of to demonstrate the vast amount of ways you can actually design it. We have a full label reaching in kind of inside. We've got an image view that spans the whole content view. We got this content view here with just simple 2 images in. This one's got 4 in. So we got some different stuff going along now. So let's work with something different. Let's go with a, not a label. Let's go with a button this time. We haven't done a button yet. So let's space the button in. And let's say we're going to have multiple buttons. Let's go with 3 buttons. So we can do what we've just done before. Select them all. And we'll pin those around. So they're not quite to 8 there. So I'll change it to 8. There we go. And we want to make sure that these also have equal widths. Add those constraints in. And then we're just going to quickly update the frames. There we go. Now we've got a problem with this one because having 3 in a row doesn't quite equal what we want it to. As we can say here, we click this one. I think this is the one that's got the problem. It says here, if I expand this over, expected to be 120. The width equals 104. Is that correct? Oh, it equals 103. What does this equal? 104, 103, 104. So if I set that one to 104, how does it like it? There's no problems there. So I'm not sure why it didn't just do that for us anyway. Space that back over. There we go. So we've got those 4 buttons in now then. So let's change how these look as well. So I'm all changing how they look because when we get rid of the background color on the buttons or on the objects or the views, I should say, they're going to look very different. So add in the background color there. Let's change the text there and up it. Nice. So think of this then as your own interface. If you're adding in actions, maybe you can click on the actual images or the buttons and they do things. It's a pretty cool interface we're going to have set up. So we've got 2 more left to do then. So let's see what we could place in here. Let's go for some more labels. We haven't worked with multiple labels just yet. And how many should we should fit in? Try and fit in 2. There we go. Should be able to get it to lock on. There we go. And I'll center these. and do what we've done before. Okay, change that to 8. All linked in. Equal widths again. Add that constraints. And just going to quickly update the frames, because we added that constraint in and it was 1 over. No, the frames are okay. Okay, fair enough. He must have done it himself. And then we'll go for the whole changing how it looks, because this is going to look really good, this whole interface. So change it to black. Upgrade that size. Center them. And we're also going to add a minimum, just in case we're going to need it. I'm not too sure, but it's nice to kind of cover our backs there, giving it a minimum font scale to allow it to go down. And our last one, let's go for another image. So you can use whatever type of images you want to add in. Let's try and place that in there. Now, do I go for as many images as possible, or do I just keep it normal? Because when this gets resized, it is going to change quite a lot. So that should be all in there. And let's copy and paste that. Copy and paste. Now, could I get one more in? So we've got the whole 5 in here all together. So we're going to have to do some serious juggling now. So obviously equal that to 0. And then add in all of these constraints. Want to make sure that they've also got equal widths. Add those in. Then we're going to update all the frames. And which one now says it has problems? So I believe it's the middle one. And the problem is the width is 63 versus 62. So let's make that smaller. There we go. So close that back up. And we're going to add in all the images again to these. So image 1. Image 2. Image 3. Image 4. And then finally our 5th image of image 5. So because they're going to be small squares, maybe when they get rotated, they're going to change. So let's, again, clip to bounds and change it to aspect fill. Great. And we should kind of do the same to these as well. Aspect fill and clip to bounds. So it kind of scales it all in proportion. So as you can now see then, we have this kind of full-featured, very over-the-top interface. There's a lot going on in it, a lot to take in. And we haven't even tested it, none of it at all. So we're going to select now all of the views. So select the views. I'm not sure if it allows us to select multiple views within each of the multiple. Oh, okay, it does. I was thinking it may not allow us to select all the views because they're in different stack views. But if we select all the views and then change the background to default, so it's 100% transparent, that's how our interface is going to come across. Now, it looks a bit weird with this one because we pin this to the very edge rather than having the kind of the boundaries, but it's going to look good. So let's change it into the normal iPhone simulator, the same one we're actually currently designing it on, and build and run and see exactly how it looks. So now let's build and run. Not much is going to change because this is the same size interface to the simulator. It kind of does make this image look a little bit weird, so I may just change that and not have it full screen or full in the content view. I'll update the constraints. There we go. It does look a little bit weird. Let's stop and rebuild. It's more down to my OCD that I don't like it, but we'll try it once more. So we're just waiting to load up now. And there we go. So we can still use these buttons as we normally would, you know, display text and labels. If you could select these images and it does stuff, then that would be great. This just shows you the kind of complex interface we created. It looks so complex. It really does. But behind it, they're in stack views with constraints and all added in. It was so easy to do this. Now these stack views and interfaces were created without landscape kind of completely in mind. It was more directed at a portrait view. But if we rotated, because we have all these constraints on, it doesn't look great, but it works. It rotates them round. We can still physically see our labels. I mean, we added in the aspect fill, so it stretches the images to fill in proportion But if they were scaled to fit, you could be able to see those, but they look a little bit stretched. It looks better on the smaller ones, but you can see how the interface works in landscape. There's no problems with it at all. But the main difference we're going to see is when we work with a different screen size. So let's go straight to the iPhone SE, smaller iPhone simulator, build and run this and see how the interface comes across on such a smaller screen compared to the one that we designed it on. So you can see as it loads up then, it looks great. Comparing it alongside, if I bring this up a bit there, comparing it alongside the large interface we designed this on, it looks brilliant. It looks identical. So it's that simple to create such complex interfaces, and it just makes it so simple to use stack views to add it in. Just by simply having those content views to allow us to put objects inside, we can create interfaces like this. Now, if you did add stuff in terms of like, you could click on these buttons and all these images and they did stuff, the buttons did stuff, maybe add additional things in like, map views, switches, segments, a lot more things in, you kind of see how easy it is to make and how simple it is to make a more complex interface using stack views. So I hope this kind of opens up your mind to the possibilities that you could create interface within stack views. Not just create interfaces, it's just a great way to control the content. As you can see, I've got it all nicely spaced out. I've got objects alongside each other. I've got this nice grid of 4, grid of 5, grid of 3, big one, grid of 2 there, labels. It looks brilliant. It really does look really good. And if you've been privileged enough to be developing before stack views were implemented, then you would understand how good this is, because before it was a complete nightmare getting all the constraints to do what we wanted to, and stack views just makes it that much more easier.
So there we have it. We can now create simple but yet effective universal applications within one screen for all different devices such as iPhone and iPad, and all the different screen sizes. How cool is that? So I'll see you guys in the next tutorial.